Okay, let's unpack this. If I asked you to sit down and write the ultimate job description for a national leader, a president, a prime minister, what's on that list?
You'd have the economy, right?
Yeah.
Foreign policy, military
The
command.
standard civics class stuff? But we're looking at a source today that argues all of that is, well, it's actually secondary.
Right.
In fact, this source says the job of a national leader is basically identical to a much more primal role.
A father.
A father, exactly.
And we should be clear, this isn't some, metaphorical father of the nation thing.
Not at all.
We are analyzing a perspective that says a leader has a literal, almost biological duty to protect their own specific group, their own brood. And if they fail at that one thing, nothing else matters.
It's a really provocative stance, and it comes from a deep dive we're doing today into this wide-ranging conversation between the interviewer Ken Coleman and media personality Tucker Carlson.
And Carlson is, he's a massive cultural force.
That's one way to put it. And whether you see him as a truth teller or, a lightning rod, you can't really ignore him. But our mission here isn't to debate his politics.
No. The goal is to dissect the worldview. Because in this interview, he lays out this surprisingly consistent theory of everything.
It really is, from why he thinks men are naturally slugs.
Which is an amazing term.
To why safety culture is actually a form of narcissism, all the way to a survival tip he learned in a spinning truck in Iraq.
It's a fascinating map of a mindset. And even if you totally disagree with his conclusions, you can at least see the logic of how he gets there.
So we're going to look at four main areas. First, that fatherhood standard for leaders and his whole idea of legitimate versus illegitimate authority.
Which explains so much about his, let's say, friction with institutions.
Exactly. Second, we'll get into his theory on the entropy of men and women.
Why he thinks gender relations have basically collapsed.
Then, his pivot from a political lens to a spiritual one. And finally, his practical advice for surviving what he calls the doom loop.
Let's start with that fatherhood analogy, because it really does set the stage for everything else he talks about.
So how does he make that jump from, head of state to being a dad?
It all boils down to his definition of duty. Carlson argues that a leader who puts the needs of other countries,
or even just abstract global ideas,
over their own citizens is, in his words, contemptible. He actually uses the word loathing.
Loathing. Wow, that is a visceral reaction.
It is. But it tracks with his whole philosophy. He says, look, I am responsible for my children. I'm not responsible for my neighbor's children.
Okay.
You could be nice to the neighbor's kids. You can help them out. But if you feed the neighbor's kids while your own kids are starving,
you fail.
You haven't just made a policy error. You've violated a natural law. You've failed as a father.
So things like foreign aid or certain interventions, he sees them not just as bad strategy, but as a moral failing if things aren't perfect at home.
Precisely. The nation state is the family, just bigger. And this connects directly to his ideas on authority, which I thought was one of the most nuanced parts of this whole thing.
Yeah, you'd expect him to be all about hierarchy, but that's not quite it.
Not at all. He claims he's an egalitarian at heart. But he clarifies, hierarchy is natural, it's in nature, someone has to be in charge, but he only respects that authority if it's legitimate.
Okay, so what's the litmus test? What makes authority legitimate to him?
It's all about fairness, consistency. He says if the rules are applied equally, he'll follow them. He'll respect the boss.
But if they're not?
But if the authority is arbitrary or hypocritical or just, fake, it deserves zero respect. He traces this all the way back to his childhood.
Growing up in L.A. in the 70s.
Yeah, the Wild West era, as you said. He just paints this picture of the adults around him constantly flaking out.
Right.
They were acting crazy, shirking their duties, but then they turn around and hold kids to these super strict standards. He talks about teachers telling him he was a bad person, that he was going to fail.
And most kids would just internalize that. They'd crumble.
But he didn't get sad. He got angry. He calls it angry defiance. He basically decided then and there that if the adults weren't acting like adults, their authority was void.
Null and void.
And he applies that exact same lens to the government today. He gives this modern example of illegitimate authority with the legal system.
This is the Epstein and tax law comparison.
Exactly. He looks at it through this lens of two standards. You have elites, he argues, committing these horrible crimes with Epstein, and nothing happens. The list is hidden. No one goes to jail.
But if you're a regular person...
If a regular guy makes a, quote, bad deduction on his taxes, the system comes down on him like a ton of bricks. For Carlson, that's not just unfair. It violates the law of the universe.
The spark of God inside people, right? That feeling we all have for what's fair.
Yes. And this is where it gets really interesting when you see how he evaluates world leaders. Because if you apply this father framework,
Protect your own people.
your scorecard looks completely different from the standard Western one.
This is where he talks about El Salvador and their president, Nayib Bukele.
Right, Bukele. Now, by most Western metrics, he's criticized, right, for suspending civil liberties, mass incarceration.
He's called an authoritarian, a strong man.
But Carlson looks at the exact same data and sees a good father
Because the crime rate plummeted.
because the children are safe. El Salvador went from being the murder capital of the world to one of the safest countries in the hemisphere. Carlson's take is super simple. Bukele put the bad guys in jail so the good people could live.
He protected the family.
He protected the family. The method matters less to him than the result. Safety for his specific people.
Okay, but then he brings up Vladimir Putin. And this is where I think a lot of listeners might, hit the brakes.
For sure. He famously interviewed Putin.
So how does he fit Putin into this father framework without just ignoring the war in Ukraine?
Well, it's really crucial to note that he explicitly says the war is bad. He says attacking political opponents is bad. He says, I'm not defending any of that.
So he's not giving him a pass.
He's not. But then he pivots right back to his single metric. What is the material reality for the citizens? He argues that if you ask a Russian in Moscow if their life is better today than in the 1990s, the answer is yes.
He talks about how clean it is, right?
He does. He was shocked by the lack of graffiti, the safety, the clean subways,
Yeah.
especially compared to the chaos his own father saw there in the 80s.
So his argument is Putin fixed the crumbling house.
Pretty much, in his worldview, a leader who provides safety and clean streets, even if they limit freedom, is doing a better job than a leader who talks about democratic virtues while their cities become dirty and dangerous.
It's a purely utilitarian metric. Did you take care of the household?
Precisely. If your family is fed and safe, you're a good dad. If you're quoting poetry while your kids are getting mugged, you're a failure. That's the core of it.
So that's the macro level, the nation. But the interview spends a lot of time on the micro level, the actual family unit.
Yeah, and this part was surprisingly theoretical. He starts with this statistic.
Yeah. Marriage age.
The marriage age for men. It jumped from 23 in 1970 to 30 today.
Which is a huge shift. 7 years is a lifetime when you're young. Most people would point to, economics, education costs.
Carlson takes a much, much darker view. He argues there's been a 60-year campaign to convince men and women they don't need each other.
And the result is what? Mutual hatred.
Suspicion and hatred, yeah. But the funniest part is his theory on the nature of men. It's not very flattering.
I actually laughed out loud at this. He literally calls men slugs.
He did. He references physics. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. He's convinced men are just naturally lazy. He says men will never do anything unless they have to.
So this whole idea of the self-motivated alpha male, the grinder, he doesn't buy it.
Not without some kind of external pressure, no. He thinks men just devolve. He tells this hilarious story about his son's bathroom.
Oh, right. The hazmat suit.
The hazmat suit. He says without a woman's influence, that bathroom descends into what he calls entropy.
The gradual decline into disorder.
Exactly. He thinks the natural state of a man alone is just filth and chaos. And the only thing that turns a slug into a provider is burden, necessity.
He tells that story about his old boss.
Yeah, when he was 25, just had a baby, and his boss told him, if you had to, you'd rob a liquor store to feed that kid.
Which is not great legal advice, but it makes the point.
It's the gunpoint of necessity. He believes men need that burden of a wife and kids to become civilized. But he also has a very specific formula for how that marriage needs to work.
The secret ingredient.
Yes. He sets up this equation. Men are required to love, and women are required to respect.
That sounds very biblical. Husbands, love your wives.
It is. And he admits it's incredibly difficult. Because for a woman to respect a man, the man has to be,
Worthy of respect.
worthy of respect.
Yeah.
If he's acting like a slug, she's not going to respect him. And if she doesn't respect him, he won't feel loved. It's this cycle.
He also gets into male friendship, which he thinks is in a total crisis.
He says organic male friendship is basically a myth. He thinks women might naturally fall into these deep bonds, but for men, it requires aggressive intentionality.
Aggressive intentionality. That sounds like a business plan.
For him, it's essential maintenance. He has this pact with 4 friends, goes all the way back to 1989. They vowed to meet once a year no matter what.
And what's the return on that investment?
Stability. He points out that all 5 of them are still married to their first wives, their kids are doing well. He credits that male bond outside the home with keeping the home stable.
But it's also about accountability,
Oh yeah, this leads to the fat story, which is just brutal.
but also very funny.
So he's on a ski lift with one of these guys. He'd quit nicotine and replaced it with food. Gained a lot of weight.
And his wife, being nice, never said a word.
Never said a word.
Ah.
But his friend just looks him up and down on the ski lift and says flat out, "You're fat. You're disgusting."
Ouch.
But it worked. He said he lost 40 pounds right away. His point is that men need that kind of blunt, harsh truth-telling that only another man can really provide.
A wife loves you too much to shame you. A friend loves you enough to be a jerk about it.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So we've done the political and the personal. But then the conversation takes this really sharp turn. He says that about 10 years ago, he realized he wasn't having political debates anymore.
This is the spiritual shift, and this is so key to understanding his work now.
Absolutely. He used to look at liberals and think, okay, they have bad ideas, they're misguided, but their intentions are good.
A standard disagreement. We both want a safe city, we just disagree on how to get there.
Exactly. But then he started seeing policies that, to him, made zero logical sense. He brings up defund the police. His logic is, if you take cops out of poor neighborhoods, violence goes up. Poor people get hurt.
So a rational person trying to help wouldn't do that.
So he concluded it wasn't incompetence. He concluded it was malevolence, that the goal wasn't to help, but to destroy. The example that really crystallized this for him was about Janet Yellen.
The Treasury Secretary.
Yellen made a comment that abortion access was good for labor force participation. You know, an economic point.
A lot of economists would just nod at that as a data point.
But Carlson heard something totally different.
What did he hear?
He heard child sacrifice. He literally compared it to a Canaanite religious ritual, killing a child for prosperity. He says, we aren't looking at economics. We're looking at killing for its own sake.
That is a massive leap to make.
Yeah.
From economic policy to ancient ritual.
It is, but it explains his intensity. If you think your opponent is just wrong on taxes, you could have a debate. If you think they're serving a dark spiritual force...
You can't just agree to disagree.
Right. He thinks there are unseen forces driving all this. And that's led him straight to the Bible.
Which he reads every day.
Yeah.
And the figure he identifies with most is Paul the Apostle.
Not David, not Moses, Paul.
Yeah.
The writer, the guy always in prison.
Yeah.
He just admires Paul's toughness. He talks about him writing these world-changing letters while chained to a wall in a Roman prison with no plumbing.
But he also sees, like, supernatural proof in Paul's life.
He does. He points out that after Paul converted, his old friends didn't just disagree with him, they wanted to kill him.
Right.
Carlson sees that extreme, violent reaction as proof of spiritual warfare. And he sees a parallel today with what he calls the J word.
The J word.
Jesus. He says you can go to a fancy dinner party and talk about God or the universe, and everyone's fine with it. It's polite.
It's socially acceptable.
But the second you say the name Jesus, the room freezes. People get uncomfortable, angry even.
And he sees that social awkwardness as data.
As proof of power. If it were just a historical name, who would care? The fact that it provokes that kind of reaction tells him there's real power there.
So if he believes we're in a spiritual war and the political world is fake, how does he actually live day to day? You'd think he'd be glued to the internet 24/7.
And that's the central paradox. He's a creature of media who bans mass media from his own home. He and his wife haven't had a TV in the living room or cable news on since 1991.
That is genuinely shocking for a cable news host.
He calls ignorance a shield. He references the Garden of Eden. They were kicked out for knowledge, not ignorance. He thinks constantly consuming this angry news cycle creates a doom loop in your brain.
He thinks some things just aren't worth knowing.
Or seeing. And he takes this analog lifestyle pretty seriously. He has this coffee grinder.
The 100-year-old hand crank one?
Yes. And he makes his staff look at it. It's not about being a coffee snob.
It's a symbol.
It's a reminder that electricity is a new innovation. He tells them, we don't need the power grid to survive. It's about not being dependent on the very system he's critiquing.
And this skepticism extends to our modern obsession with safety. I found this part really counterintuitive. He calls safety culture narcissism.
Yeah, he completely flips it. He says obsessing over safety, always saying be safe, is just a way of pretending you're in control, that you're the center of the universe.
Like main character energy.
Totally. He says there is no such thing as safety, only destiny. You can jog every day and eat kale and still just drop dead. He tells that story about Jim Fixx.
The guy who basically invented jogging in the 70s.
and died of a heart attack while jogging. Carlson's point isn't that running is bad. It's that you can't virtue signal your way to living forever.
You have to accept you're not in control.
Exactly. And stop being so afraid. He claims he has zero career ambition anymore, just wants to pay his mortgage and give the finger to people misusing power.
Which brings us to the final, and I think maybe the most powerful image from this entire deep dive.
The Isuzu Trooper's story.
Yeah. This is the survival tip from Iraq.
So he's in a war zone in this Trooper, and the driver loses control. The vehicle starts spinning, and they're hurtling toward a concrete building. He thought, this is it. I'm dead.
And the driver.
The driver somehow, at the last second, gets control and misses the building by inches. And afterwards, Carlson asks him, how did you do that?
And the driver gives him this piece of advice that he now applies to everything.
If you don't want to hit something, don't look at it.
It's like a race car driver's philosophy. Look where you want to go, not at the wall.
That's it. And Carlson applies this to the doom loop of our society. He says everyone is just staring at the problems.
Yeah.
The fiscal collapse, the wars, the demographic shifts.
You're all obsessing over the crash.
And by staring at it, we are staring right into it.
So his advice is to look away.
His advice is punch through the fear. Be cheerful. Live your life. Have kids. Grill steaks. Don't look at the wall, because if you stare at the wall, you're going to hit it.
It's a compelling synthesis when you put it all together. You have one of the most famous political commentators in the world.
Telling you that politics is fake. The real battle is spiritual.
And the only way to win is to turn off the news and focus on your own family.
It's a worldview that is deeply pessimistic about the system, but surprisingly optimistic about the individual.
It really forces you to ask yourself, in this era of constant doom scrolling, are we steering ourselves into the crash just because we can't look away from it?
That is the question.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.